This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward.
Hello, I'm Russ Capper, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. Today, our guest is Lee Fuller, Vice President of Government Relations with the Independent Petroleum Association of America. And we're going to talk with Lee about the IPAA, the impact of which political party holds the executive branch, about shale gas, hydraulic fracturing, the EPA, the Keystone Pipeline, and more. All of that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show, reporting from the 2013 NAPE Conference. And my guest now is Lee Fuller, Vice President of Government Relations with IPAA. That's the Independent Petroleum Association of America. Lee, welcome to the Energy Maker Show.
Well, thanks, Russ. I'm happy to be here. What can I talk to you about today?
Well, let's start with the IPAA. For those in our audience who aren't familiar, tell them about it.
Well, the Independent Petroleum Association of America is a Washington-based trade association. Its primary activities tend to be advocacy for issues to both Congress and the regulatory agencies that affect independent producers in the United States. Our membership is comprised of companies ranging in size from large publicly traded independent producers like Anadarko or Devon, Chesapeake, EOG Resources, down to small mom and pop operations who really operate America's marginal oil and gas wells. We also have the service industry as a part of our membership. We have a lot of all the support industries associated with independent producers and production of oil and natural gas in the United States.
I imagine that being the advocacy force for this, you kind of go through an up and down depending upon what political party might be in charge at the time. Would that be accurate?
Well, that's true, but Congress, regardless of which party's in charge, has factors from the other party that can really influence the debate. Where you see the biggest difference is whoever is in charge of the executive branch, of course, can drive regulatory issues.
Right.
And drive them very strongly, particularly right now where Congress is in such gridlock. It's unable to really pass laws, which means it can either change the direction of a law or impede a regulatory process if it doesn't like where it's going. That's one of the major challenges that we face today.
Okay, well, and with this administration, with the Obama administration, it's been kind of interesting. It seemed to me that in the beginning he was aggressively stiff-arming everything to do with fossil fuels, from the EPA to the Department of Energy, Keystone Pipeline. But it was hard, it seemed like, to look away when you started seeing what's happening now and the incredible innovation with horizontal drilling and of course hydraulic fracturing has presented the country with a boom of abundant, cheap, clean energy. It seems to me that he's moving back in the fossil fuel direction. Do I have that right?
Well, we're going to find out over the next year, probably year and a half. I think you're right. When you look at where the administration started, it certainly came in with a very, very renewable fuels-focused agenda.
Right.
And a discounting of oil and natural gas
Right.
and the role that it should play in the future. If you look at some of the early budgets of the administration, it would propose eliminating oil and gas tax provisions, partly because they encourage the production of oil and natural gas.
Right.
So as the time has gone on, and a couple of things have happened. I think one, the reality of the shale revolution, both in gas and now in oil,
Right.
so changed the prospects of fossil energy, oil and gas in the United States, that really can't be ignored. And secondly, it's been such a strong economic driver in so many states that the administration really, I think, felt it had to take a different look, partly from a standpoint of the effect it was having on the economy, and I think in a different way, the effect it could have on our international abilities to negotiate with countries from a position of energy strength than from one of energy weakness, which we've had to deal with for so many years in the past.
Right, it's so fascinating what has happened. I'm the guy that keeps going around saying we should have a national celebration for the way things have changed. It's just monumental. But also the aspect that natural gas is burning so much cleaner than any other alternative fossil fuels, and even CO2 emissions is 10-year low, and yet that doesn't seem to even get much press these days.
Well, I think part of it is a reflection of the nature of the debate over fossil energy. Recognize that there are very strong interests who have a harsh and really extreme agenda with respect to the use of fossil energy, oil, right, gas, and coal.
Right.
And if you look back before the shale revolution took place, many of those groups were embracing natural gas as an alternative to coal because they thought it was going away. It was going to be a bridge fuel to their non-fossil fuel agenda.
Okay.
Shale gas changed that.
Right.
Now we have a 100-year supply of shale gas.
Right.
And as a result, those opponents of coal now see gas as a threat because it continues our use of fossil energy.
Right.
And therefore, where on the one hand you see clear evidence that the use of natural gas is benefiting the environment, the shift in debate tends to be focusing on, well, what kind of emissions are coming from the gas operations that we should be worried about. Not how we combust it,
right,
but what comes out of the ground that isn't controlled.
Right, right.
And so every step we move forward, there's a new litmus test that we have to pass as we debate the role of natural gas. And really now I think we're going to see a similar debate on oil because we're faced with the opportunity to really enhance our domestic and Canadian use of supply of oil for use in the United States.
Absolutely. What effect, influence can the IPAA have on the administration? I mean, do you get to call the president up and have his ear?
Well, we don't get to see the president, but we work with the regulatory agencies.
Okay.
We work with the officials who are in charge of the broad policy. For example, in April of last year, the administration created a work group that is designated with the responsibility of coordinating administration policy with respect to the development of unconventional natural gas. And it's got a head who runs that work group,
right,
and we've met with her a number of times, and we maintain a discourse on the issues. These are mostly regulatory issues.
Right.
We also meet with the Department of Interior if it's got a regulation like it does right now on the Bureau of Land Management drilling requirements. We meet with EPA, we talk with them on regulatory agendas that they're pursuing. And ultimately, I should say secondarily, whenever these rules go through their development process, they go through a period of public comment. And we participate in that comment period. We submit our arguments for how we think those regulations should be structured or whether they should be structured at all. Ultimately, the recourse is finally going to court. If we find a rule that we find just to be outrageously wrong, then we have the capacity, as anybody else does in the country, and frequently does, to challenge the structure of that rule, and that recourse is really through the federal court system.
All right, talking with Lee Fuller, Vice President of Government Relations with IPAA, and we'll be back with more with Lee after this.
At BKD, we understand the constantly shifting nature of the energy industry. As a national CPA and advisory firm, we serve energy clients from the beginning to the end of the cycle. Our experienced energy advisors serve approximately 300 energy companies in exploration, midstream, downstream, oilfield services, and power production. Plus, we're the largest North American member of the Praxity Global Alliance, which means we can help you wherever you operate. Contact a BKD advisor or visit us online to learn more.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show, continuing on with Lee Fuller, Vice President of Government Relations with IPAA. Okay, before we went to the break, we got into the EPA category. There's all the talk, all the articles, all the time about the EPA's analysis of hydraulic fracturing. What's the status of that, and where do you think it's going to end up?
Well, that's a really good question, Russ. It's been a very perplexing process to watch, not only with respect to the specific study that EPA has targeted, but with some ancillary efforts it's done as well. When that study was first put together, our view was it was going to be a prospective study. It was going to look at what are we doing in drilling oil and natural gas wells using hydraulic fracturing now, and how does that affect drinking water, which is a framing of the study. But what EPA did was, rather than look prospectively, it started looking at old cases that had been investigated and were the result of activities years ago, 5, even 10 years ago. That part of the study really hasn't come to closure yet. The prospective part hasn't even really started yet. But at the same time, what you've seen EPA do is reach out to some individual areas. You probably have heard of Dimmock, Pennsylvania, Pavilion, Wyoming, Parker County, Texas, where it has alleged that fracturing was the cause of some event or some high concentrations of chemicals in water. And in each of those instances, when it got into the details, it found itself to be wrong. As we've looked at the study, one of our frustrations has been that it has used or has not adequately quality controlled the work that it's been doing in these retrospective sites. So that has resulted in industry pushing back on the agency fairly aggressively to try to compel EPA to really look more closely at the way it's doing its work and make sure it's really understanding the geology of these areas. In many cases, Dimmock, Pennsylvania is a good example. The issue was methane in water supplies, in private water wells. And in almost every instance, we're dealing with private water wells.
Completely separate issue.
And it turned out it wasn't coming from the oil and gas operations or fracturing at least. And there was naturally occurring methane in the water. So it's really important to understand the geology of an area when you're looking at it to see what the incremental role may have been for oil and gas production. As a result, the study has likely will not conclude for another couple of years.
Wow.
And right now, it's really hard to judge what its next course will be. The work it's done on the retrospective sites has really slowed down. They put out an interim report at the end of 2012 that really didn't say very much. The prospective sites haven't been started yet. They're still negotiating with companies to do those. The end result of it, like other studies, if it's done well, will show that hydraulic fracturing, properly managed, regulated by the states as it always has been, is a safe technology to use, and groundwater is protected. Right,
despite what Yoko Ono says up in New York.
Despite what Yoko Ono says.
Okay, great. Now I understand that, and I think this is true, that the earthquake issue has kind of been put to bed. Industry not completely innocent because it was caused by disposal well improper utilization. Is that correct?
Well, I think that if there is an issue, it is related to disposal wells.
Okay.
The question becomes what in each of those instances is the proximate cause. And in some of those that I've looked at information on, it seems to be improper operation, trying to put too much water in when the system really wasn't ready to handle that.
Right.
Which basically says that if you look at the 150,000 Class II wells there are around the United States, that have been operating since well before there was an EPA.
Right.
That the basic process is well regulated,
Right.
and it will continue to be well regulated. Right. Now, this particular type of well has both state and federal regulatory systems involved. Typically, the state has primacy to run the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements or regulations, and I would expect that there may be some efforts to try to look more closely at the permitting process in going forward, and particularly probably look at whether there might be seismicity issues that need to be addressed in the formations that are being used for new wells.
Okay.
But none of that has yet happened. Okay. And even in those instances where where these events have occurred, trying to understand exactly what happened is really not a settled issue.
Okay. Now, before I let you go, got to ask this question: Keystone Pipeline, is that ever going to get done?
Well, that's going to be really, I think, a threshold test for where the second term of the Obama administration is headed. We saw, as I said earlier, that in 2012, when there were about 10 different federal agencies initiating efforts to regulate oil and gas production, the administration stepped in and started trying to look at how to organize that. And since that time, they've been a lot more cautious about their regulatory agenda. Keystone is obviously a huge political issue for the administration from both directions. It's an opportunity to work very closely with Canada to build a network of resources that will help U.S. refineries back away from using as much foreign oil, I should say non-North American oil as they do now.
Right.
But it's become a litmus test for the environmentalists. And as a result, how the administration chooses to move forward on this will probably give us a strong sense of what it means for the rest of the oil and gas regulatory regime that it has, in one way or another, started moving toward, but delayed today.
So that's going to be the big indicator.
I think it's going to be a really big indicator, Russ.
All right. Lee, I really appreciate you giving us some time and bringing us up to date.
You bet. Glad to be here.
You bet. That's Lee Fuller, Vice President of Government Relations with the Independent Petroleum Association of America. And that wraps up this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com.